And we are an occupational therapy group that works to help children with their sensory processing skills. In general, sensory processing is the ability to interpret and respond to any sensory input that we're receiving efficiently and effectively so we can maintain an arousal state. Our sensory systems also help us with motor planning and our ability to complete our daily tasks and routines. Oftentimes, when we're working with kids, parents are coming in as you guys were hearing. My kid is said to be clumsy, they're not able to dress themselves. They might have difficulty with body awareness where they're stumbling and falling into people. They also can be very sensitive to sensory input where they might have a hard time with loud noises and they're covering their ears. They sometimes will elope from settings out of perceived nowhere and have difficulty with bright lights or the sound of other people. So in general, we work with these kids so that way their bodies are responding more appropriately and effectively to sensory input. Um, Today, I know that we're talking mostly about co-regulation strategies and sensory-based strategies to help. In general, co-regulation is the idea that the caregiver or trusted adult is able to use their regulation skills to impact the child they're working with. Oftentimes, this looks like a child having a meltdown, and instead of us saying, calm down, calm down, calm down, and adding more input and stress to the environment, it's our ability to use our self-regulation, such as deep breathing, finding a quiet space, lowering the lights, and directing the child into calming activities. When a child is in that meltdown state, they're not in their learning brain, so they're not taking in new information. This is not the time to be coaching kids. It's the time to be leading them. So it's all about you being a calm and competent leader. Um, so oftentimes, if I have a client having a meltdown, I'll get down on their level. If they're open to it, I'll give them deep squeezes on their arms, going from shoulder down to their wrists. And I will be talking in a calm voice, saying, you are safe, I am here, and just doing the deep breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. Children will often pick up on our bodies and use our body to regulate their own. If they sense that you are in distress, they're going to feel even more out of control. So this is the time to tap into your inner yogi and really embrace your calm to give that to somebody else. Um, I don't know if you see this at home or in the classroom a lot. Some things that also help can be turning off the lights. Another thing that often happens is children's bodies run a lot warmer than our body, and they're not recognizing their internal state of agitation. So checking if their body is too hot, if we're trying to give them deep pressure, we're going to also be using our body heat, which can in turn continue to agitate them. So applying ice, having them take off a sweatshirt or a sweater if they have something underneath so they can get calm and cool will also help them to regulate. And the idea is that you're not asking, you are doing, and you have the plan in your head so they're able to follow your lead. Some other sensory strategies are also having a quiet place to go where you have fidgets or small things that they can look at, like spinning lights are often calming in a dark space, as long as there's no other contraindications for seizures or anything. Bubbles can be really regulating because you're encouraging deep breathing with blowing. Having them count or sing a song can help them to regulate and to attend to the task at hand as well. So those are just some quick strategies off the top of my head, but I was told this would be a great opportunity to ask more specific questions to brainstorm here. Are there any
Yeah, I
kids
have a
that you guys are
question.
thinking of that you might need some ideas about?
I have a question. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So my son just turned 22 months, and I just don't know how much of his behavior is like normal toddler behavior versus like he is like the most energetic child I've ever met in my life and is just like ping-ponging around constantly. It's like it's like he has so much energy that it's just like shooting out of his hands. And so like he loves other kids and he will like run and run and like go up to them. I just never know if it's going to be like a hug or if it's going to be a hit because he just like is so excited. And like I just
Yeah.
don't know like what the line is between like what's normal and what's not and like also how to like manage that because like if he does hit, he's not upset. It's like he's just so excited and trying to play and like doesn't
Yeah.
like control his body.
So something, I mean, toddlers are learning. If he's 22 months, he hasn't even been in the world for 2 whole years. And if you're learning a new skill, it's going to take you a lot longer than 2 years to be an expert in it. And he is learning so many things all at once. What I will say, he sounds like a Tigger. So those are the kids that can go, 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 but they never seem to get tired. Um, those kids are often having a hard time modulating their responses to movement. And instead of helping them reach a calm, satiated state, they're often getting more excited by it. Some strategies we often use in session is practicing when we are calm. So using a social story of showing him how we can approach what are his verbal skills like? Is he talking a lot right now? Is he using a lot of gestures?
He's a combination of gestures and talking, but it's mostly like one word at a time. He doesn't really have any two word phrases yet.
So one thing we could do is like we could say hug when we're walking up to ask if the child wants a hug, and we can practice that. You can also practice using your nonverbal body signals to show him. So sometimes we'll practice like, does it look like I'm ready for a hug? And I'll have my arms crossed and be really tight. And that's showing I'm not ready. But if my arms are out and I have a smile on, that's showing I am ready, and practicing almost like red light, green light with it where they can hug you when your arms are open and they have to stop. You can also try to show like high fives and practice that. There are other activities. It sounds like OT might be beneficial just to really look more in depth at his sensory systems to see if we can help you develop something called a sensory diet. And these are activities that are specified to each child that we facilitate throughout the day. So that way their sensory cup never gets too full or too empty to help them maintain a more regulated state. So that way, when we are in an exciting situation, we've hopefully prepped the body enough where we're ready to enter it and respond as expected to our peers. Um, and we try to individualize these to each child so that way parents feel comfortable and competent, and each child feels like they're getting their needs met.
Great, thank you. Tigger definitely seems like the right descriptor for him. Uh,
Those are our bread and butter. We have a lot of them here.
yeah, we'll try that with the because we're doing high fives and stuff. And like he can sit calmly and like read a book by himself for a long time. It's just like when we go to a music class or the playground, he just gets so excited and doesn't know how to contain himself.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance and unpredictability in those environments, even though it's like the music class might be a similar routine every time. It might be a new song, or maybe there's different friends. And it can just be, it's new and exciting. So even doing something called a social story where you don't need like a whole book, but you can just walk him through like, okay, today we're going to music class and we're going to sit in front of mommy and they're going to give us an instrument and we're going to play our instrument together. And there might be other friends that are running around, but we only will run when the teacher tells us, and kind of giving him that opportunity to take in the information and plan ahead can help him to respond better and to know what to expect in the moment. With the playground, you feel like we're going to the playground. If we meet a new friend, we can ask for a hug. And then we're going to play, and mommy's going to set her timer. When the timer goes off, we're going to go get lunch or something. So that way he kind of knows what's coming and can start to prep. These things take time to build the skills. It takes about 3 to 8 weeks for kids to become comfortable with a new tool. So it is about the consistency of the expectation and the follow through as well.
Great, thank you so much. That was really helpful.
Of course. Are there any other questions?
Got a question. I've got a 5.5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. And the 5.5-year-old, when he's engrossed in something, he's super engrossed and interested. And when he's um, not interested in it, like when he's practicing vocabulary, things like that, he rolls around in his shirts, like spins his shirts around like he's a snake trying to shed his skin. What I've been trying to practice some body stillness, like yoga poses or just hands on your knees with some still breathing for a couple minutes before to sort of to prime himself and to calm himself down to focus on the next thing. Um, is there anything else you could recommend besides like, is there any tools you can recommend to help me navigate that situation?
Yeah, so part of it is he can probably sit when it's something he's interested in
Yeah, yeah.
because it's very internally motivating, whereas vocabulary is not. So you can also combine it by breaking it up into smaller chunks. So say you have 10 words that you guys are trying to learn by the end of the week for a test or something, or for whatever outcome, you can break it into like, we're going to do 2 words, and you guys can even do like red light, green light or something. And like he runs when, if, is it like spelling words or is it definitions for
Oh,
vocab?
it's spelling words. So they're red
Okay.
words. Yeah, some of them are sight words. Some of them are sounding them out. If there's like 30 words that have or more have built up since the beginning of the year. So some of them he knows really
Okay.
easily, and then there's some new ones. But it's just about the shirt spinning and the rolling on the floor. And I think he's definitely seeking some like some additional sensation above and beyond just sitting still and doing the learning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can try out something called a wobble stool. They allow kids to get more movement, or even sitting on a ball can be helpful. You can also try combining it with like he jumps for every letter or something, or maybe you have words you're holding up. Like if he sees the word me, he's going to do 5 jumps forward. If he sees the word you, he's going to do like 3 crawling steps forward. It seems like he's seeking a lot of extra movement and heavy work during these
Mhm.
activities. So he's probably sitting all day at school. So allowing the learning at home to be something more fun and motivating, and turning it into a game. So that way it is something the kids, their natural state is to play. So we should make learning playful for them. Turning it into songs is great, and clapping along to the letters can be helpful for them to spell it. And you're also using that multimodal learning. If he likes tactile input, you can put shaving cream on a table and have him spell out the words with his finger in shaving cream. So that way he's getting some of like that regulating tactile input, or even in like rice, if you put it on like a baking tray, he can spell it out that way. You can hide pictures of the words around the house and give him a list of words he has to find, or just like written words, and you tell him to go find one. So it's more of like a scavenger hunt. Um, and I would also like, maybe if that's too overwhelming for him where it's getting overstimulating, maybe we're just practicing. If you have a list of 30 words, we're practicing 3 words we know, 2 words we don't know. And then we get a break and we get to do something that we enjoy for 5 to 10 minutes. And then we're going to come back and work for 5 minutes. And as we slowly build up that endurance, we'll be able to do longer periods.
So that was my follow-up question. What do you think is the rate of decrease of the duration of these intermissions? Is it like 5% a week or something like this? Or how should I think about decreasing the intermissions?
I usually try to do it once the child is showing that they're successful and they're tolerating it. So, say you're starting with a kid and they can only sit at the table for 2 minutes before we're falling out of our chair.
Mhm.
We know their endurance is 2 minutes and you're offering a break. Maybe the break is 3 minutes then, instead of being 5 or 10 minutes, to get that movement in. But as that becomes easier for them, you can use visual timers. There's a bunch of fun timers on the App Store where like it counts down to be a picture. So that's a little more age appropriate for some of the younger kids. If they're okay with noises, just having the timer go off can be appropriate as well. But then as it's getting easier and they're able to sit, and when it's time for the break, they're not falling out of their chair anymore, you can start to add a minute to that. So maybe even if you're just brainstorming this week where you start and you're like, okay, we're going to see what our baseline is. And if it's on average about 4 minutes, we're starting with 4 minutes as our goal. And then hopefully as we're incorporating movement breaks in, that time is getting easier to sit and we're able to spread longer. Maybe it's 5 minutes next week. And as that gets easier, we can build up to 6. Kindergartners should be able to sit for like 15-ish minutes with an activity.
Okay.
Usually when it's motivating, but
Okay.
with the activities we're not interested in, it does decrease for sure.
And you haven't mentioned any sort of food-based rewards for these things, or rewards in general? These are mostly, is that something that you don't think is such a good idea? Like if you do this, you get a piece of gum, or you do this, you get a piece of candy.
So we look at it more as tools. As adults, we chew gum. Like I chew gum all the time because it is a regulating strategy for me. It helps me to focus. There's a lot of different viewpoints on rewards, but at its core, if we're trying to motivate someone with an external reward for something that they don't necessarily care about, it's not necessarily teaching them to intrinsically have those skills. They're just doing it for the reward. And with some kids, they reach a point where the reward doesn't matter more than their dislike of that activity. So we try to use tools, maybe chewing something like you can freeze like Starburst or fruit leather or like frozen grapes, anything like that. And maybe that is going to give them enough input to focus better. So it's more about finding tools to help the attention rather than rewarding the expected behavior of participating in the classwork, and finding ways to help them feel successful, because sometimes rewards end up backfiring because either they have to get bigger and more enticing, or it just shuts the kids down completely where they don't even care about the reward anymore.
So how do you define a tool?
A tool is anything that is going to help regulate our body. So for some people, for a lot of people, chewing is very regulating. We can offer Chewery or chewy tubes that can really help kids focus. If your kid is old enough and they understand the concept and you feel comfortable with it, gum is a great one. Even like hard candies or mints can be great. With mints, you get the extra input, but it's anything that we experiment with and we find it improves our outcome. So oftentimes breaking things up with movement, gross motor is going to help our fine motor and our cognition because it's getting the whole body moving together. So if we're able to use a tool like maybe jumping beforehand and then sitting, we're recognizing that jumping and movement is a tool to get our body to a regulated arousal state. If you think of it kind of like a band, if he's down here below the band of optimal arousal for our learning time, the jumping might bring him into the band of optimal arousal, and then we can use it again when we fall out of it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great question. Are there any other questions?
I have a question. My son is 3 and I find his sensory his sensory things are food based. Like he's not willing to he used to eat more varied foods, but now it's more homogenous. For example, he eats a chocolate covered peanut butter bar, but if it's smashed or slightly humid, he doesn't want that. He wants a perfectly intact bar, and like he's not willing to even try new foods. So yeah, that's the struggle that we've been having.
It's very common. Feeding is the most complex thing we do as humans. It is, if you think of it like a triangle, it is the only activity that involves all 8 of our sensory systems to work cohesively together. We can typically get by with one of them not working for another task, but feeding is involving everything all at once. It's sound, and our sensory systems mature a lot between the first year and our early toddlerhood and by the time we turn 5. So kids typically become pickier or more selective eaters between 18 to 24 months and 3 to 5 years because they're taking in more sensory information and processing it. Before then, everything is a new experience. And they're also learning to be more independent, so they're exercising their no. It sounds like he's having a lot of challenges in what we would call visual overreactivity within food. So he's making a visual decision based on how it's presented, and that's activating his nervous system, where he's going from calm, regulated to I'm in fight or flight. That's something that's new. If it's crushed in his little brain, it is a different food, and that's scary. Um, so I do think that if he's having those kinds of challenges, occupational therapy would be really helpful for him because we could look holistically at why we're having these feeding challenges. Is it a tactile reason? Is the visual reason the only one? Are there any oral motor things that are impacting us? Oftentimes, feeding is so complex because it involves chewing and swallowing and our sensory processing skills. So sometimes what happens is kids visually associate a certain food or a texture with a previous experience, and maybe their mouths aren't working as they need to chew or navigate their tongue with different foods, and they might have had a bad experience and now they're scared of anything that is not specifically their safe foods. Trying new foods, they don't know what to expect, what the flavor is going to be. It's really intimidating. So in OT, especially at that age, it's really play-based where we're trying to help them learn that food isn't scary, food is really enjoyable, and this is a social activity. So helping them bring them through what we call the steps to eating, where first we're just visually tolerating food. Then we start to use our nose to explore food, then our tactile system. Then we start to bring food up closer to our mouth, and it's giving them the tools and you the tools to safely talk about and explore food at a level where their nervous system is never getting too activated. And that way they feel comfortable moving up the steps. So for example, within the steps to eating, we don't even touch food with our body until step 15, and that's with one finger, and there's 32 complete steps to eating. So there's a lot of work to be done at the visual and olfactory level before we even get to exploring it with our tactile system.
Interesting. Thank you.
So it could be really helpful to come in. Feeding
Yeah.
is a very hard task for families. I know
Yeah.
that.
Awesome.
This
Yes.
is great. Thank you. I really appreciate this. I'm just listening more to everybody else's questions. Thank you.
No problem. Are there any other questions? Feeding is a really common one we get. We know it's really hard. Your job as parents is to get your kid to eat, and when they won't, it's very stressful.
Yeah, definitely.
What about a kid who keeps touching their lips and putting junk in their mouth, like sleeves, jackets, shirts, fingers, everything?
Is this your 5.5-year-old?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he
Okay.
started young. He started young, but yes.
Just because sometimes that is appropriate. I would say that, so within our jaw and our mouth is our most sensitive cavity for our tactile receptors and our proprioceptors. Proprioception is the heavy work on our joints. That's why chewing gum is really regulating as adults, because we're activating the proprioceptive system, which is our grounding and regulating system. Kids, especially in schools, because gum can end up anywhere, will often compensate by chewing on pencils, crayons, their sleeves, fingers, because they're trying to give themselves the input they need. So jewelry can be really helpful because they can like hang it as a necklace and redirect that to be chewing. You can also work in different ideas within their diet. So if they're open to changes in food, adding more intense flavors like hot sauce or adding pepper, red pepper flakes, lemon, lime, anything to increase the intensity of the food they're eating can be really great because it's going to bring more awareness to their mouth and increase the sensory environment when they're eating. You can also incorporate more crunchy and chewy snacks. So like carrot sticks are really good. Pretzel rods versus pretzel sticks can be great because it's a lot more chewing involved. Um, Things like bagels where they have to rip and really use their big muscles in their mouth to chew can just provide more input throughout the day where they're able to reach that regulated arousal state and maybe not rely on chewing non-food objects as well. Using a vibrating toothbrush can be great because they're getting more input throughout that hygiene experience. We sometimes use vibrating teethers when it's appropriate because when the kids bite down, it increases the intensity, so they might not need to be chewing on a non-food object as long. You can even
So
get things called Z-Vibes that have spoon attachments, so you can increase the vibration when they're eating as well with like yogurt and applesauce and stuff.
like the opposite of a Parkinson's spoon.
Yeah, pretty much.
So it seems like your advice is to basically increase the difference between the highs and the lows. Like he's trying to stimulate for like a moderate baseline experience, but to instead increase the intensity of eating to therefore decrease the rest of the stimulation he needs.
Exactly. It also just
Okay.
depends on the kid. Sometimes doing whole body proprioceptive input can be as or more effective just because our mouth is more sensitive. It's a more intense experience. But wearing compression garments, or even for kids this little, getting like an Under Armour shirt that's a size too small, can give them more deep pressure throughout the day. Doing heavy work like carrying heavy backpacks or carrying groceries can be great. Pushing laundry baskets full of laundry across the floor is really beneficial. If they're able to like help you unload the dishwasher or take out the trash, you're working in those heavy work experiences to give their whole body proprioceptive input. So they might not need to rely on the oral proprioceptive input as much. Bear hugs, animal walks are great where they can do bear walks, crawling, lizard walking where they're like sliding on their belly with their elbows. All of those are going to be heavy work experiences that will decrease the need for their oral input, hopefully, as well.
Okay.
Do
Thank
you,
you very much.
do you think the like the chewing advice would apply to thumb sucking, or is that totally another thing?
I will say for thumb sucking, it depends. Thumb sucking is really complex just because it is a like calming strategy for a lot of kids. It's a way they self-soothe. But depending, this is kind of getting into the speech realm, but there are times where kids use thumb sucking, particularly at night, to help maintain their airway for proper breathing at night when they're sleeping. If they have anything structurally going on with their mouth, our tongue is supposed to rest against the soft palate on the top of our mouth, and that promotes nasal breathing. But if we have any sort of restrictions, like an oral tie, their tongue might not rest there. So the thumb helps to rest it against the roof of the mouth and promote nasal breathing. So that one's really dependent on making sure that structurally everything is okay before we dive straight into sensory.
Okay, yeah.
So that's a little more complex, but you
Complex.
can still try those oral tools as well.
Cool.
Are there any other questions? I believe this is wrapping up in a couple of minutes. Hair twirling. So this is often, you'll hear the word stim. It's typically associated with like neurodivergence, but we all stim in general. Oftentimes, like people twirl their rings, or they might tap their foot, click a pen or a pencil a lot. Hair twirling is often a nervous habit. It depends on how hard they're pulling. They might be getting extra proprioceptive input by pulling on their hair, or it might be something to help occupy their hands. So one thing you can try is different fidgets. So depending on the age of the child, they make a variety of things. Those fidget spinners, pop beads are really exciting for kids. If they're a little older, fidget rings are great. Some kids like squishy things, some kids like harder things that they can twist. But I would explore something to, we often try to use a transition object like a hand fidget to move them out of twirling their hair. So that way we're not cutting off the need immediately. It's giving them something else to replace that until they're at a point where they have the coping skills to not need the hand fidget, if that makes sense. Awesome. Glad that makes sense for you guys. Is there anything else? Okay. Pacifiers are really hard. I know that you have a lot of background noise. Is she allowing the pacifier to fall out at night after and stay asleep, or does she wake up and need the passy back in if it falls out of her mouth?
Sorry, hopefully I don't have too much noise in the background. Thank you. Yeah, a lot of times it seems like it falls out. Like we usually just set a timer to go in and kind of take it from her, like after an hour or two. And if she wakes up in the night, it's 50-50. Sometimes she'll just like go right back to sleep. Other times she will look for it and just kind of be like, kind of give up looking for it. Sometimes she really wants it back. I will say though that she doesn't actually usually wake up that much during the night. We kind of got lucky with that. So I don't have like a good baseline, like it doesn't happen that much, but I feel like she still kind of overall like wants it back, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It sounds like she's using oral input to soothe. Some kids, if they like needed to feed before going to bed, or sometimes kids that were breastfeeding, that was such a calming experience because they were close to mom, that their brains associate that with regulation. So finding other ways to help co-regulate. Oftentimes what we recommend to parents is filling up their day with more oral input. You can work on blowing in the bathtub. You can take straws and add like extra bubbles and blow really big bubble mountains in the bathtub. Before bed, you can also, like, vibrating toothbrush again is really great. Trying to add in crunchier snacks, all of those things can help. As well as more whole body work. You can do like a lotion massage before she gets into bed to give her some heavier input. But this is probably her most familiar coping strategy, is using her pacifier, which is a great coping strategy for her, but it does kind of age out. So there are books that some parents like to use where the Passy Fairy is kind of like the Tooth Fairy is coming to take away the pacifiers, and we collect them slowly and we make rings so that way we know when the pacifier is going to leave, and we tear one off over a course of like 2 weeks, and we're reading the book and we put the pacifiers in an envelope and we send them to the Passy Fairy, and then in return, like the next morning, there's like a little party where we celebrate them not needing their pacifier anymore, and maybe they have like a special breakfast and like a little fidget toy or something that's there to help them kind of move through that. So that's often what we do, but I would definitely suggest adding in more oral input before bed, whether it's blowing bubbles with a straw or like a bubble wand. Adding more input to her diet. You can like increase the sourness of food if she's open to that. Frozen things like popsicles can be really good at night. You can make these like super healthy just by doing like Greek yogurt with some honey and freezing them into ice cube mold. They don't have to be big, but that can just bring more awareness to the mouth to help her soothe at night as well.
Thank you. Sorry, I was trying to come off mute. Yeah, that's super helpful. And she does, luckily, she likes most flavors of foods. Like she's still totally into willing to try different flavors, and she loves like very, I don't know, like very spicy stuff, but she really loves things like cinnamon. She'll put a ton of cinnamon on things, and she does like lemon. Like she'll just have plain lemon. She doesn't need a ton of
might need-
sweet stuff, but she does like the strong flavors. Yeah.
Yeah, she might need more of that throughout the day then. You can kind of load up dinner as
Okay.
well, so that way she's kind of getting more of that right before bed to help with that. But it's good that she likes all those flavors. That gives you guys a lot of leeway.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. This is super helpful. We had started trying one of the pacifier books, but didn't get it was like the last mile, just like can't quite get all the way over that finish line, I guess.
It's really hard, but trying to make it fun, like she can decorate the envelope and we're gonna send it to the Passy Ferry, and having like a plan where when it's gonna end kind of help her. It's really tough, and she's probably very emotionally attached to her pacifiers because it's something she's always known. So making it a really fun and exciting experience can be really helpful.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so
No
much.
problem. Any other last minute questions? I think that's it then. Again, I'm Nicole from Bloom Occupational Therapy. If you guys have questions, you can find us online either at Spring Ahead or Bloom Pediatric Occupational Therapy. We provide evaluations and assessments. We can do school observations as well. So we make it a very cohesive and holistic look at your child, so that way we can make sure we find the best way to support you and your family as you guys move through this journey. And then I believe the owner here, my boss, Jeff, is also available over email if there's any other questions that didn't get answered today.
Great. Thank you so much, Nicole. Really appreciate it. Very informative.
Thank you guys.
Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.